This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Some top-tier college football teams are being put to the test this weekend with some high-level matchups across college football. We are here today to break down those matchups, outline betting markets for those games, where Ed's model sees value, and get you ready for Week 5 across college football. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and on FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Wednesday by Dr. Ed Feng. You can find his work at thepowerrank.com and check him out on Twitter at thepowerrank. Ed, Week 5 is coming at us. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It was a fun last Saturday, especially with the way it closed out with Ohio State and Notre Dame. It doesn't really get any better than that in terms of sports and excitement. And yeah, hopefully we can have another great week and go from there.
And that was a very Ed game. So we've talked a lot about previously how you like those low-scoring defensive games when it's because of good defense. And it seems like it's a lot like we discussed last week, where Ohio State's defense is playing a lot better than they have in the past. They played well there, but Notre Dame stepped up too. So I feel like that game was kind of just right up your alley.
Yeah, I mean, it was up my alley in so many ways. In a weird way, I think you guys all know I live in Ann Arbor and I'm a Michigan fan and have become the biggest Ohio State apologist over the last 2 years, which is just very strange, and I continue to do it. I don't know. It's just my job as an analyst. You have to forget about who you're a fan of. I think Ohio State's really good. I think good. I mean, I'm not sure necessarily the numbers really shown out or anything about that, but man, he stepped back there and he's not CJ Stroud and he's not Bryce Young, but he drops back and he can hit those medium passes, and he's got the best set of wide receivers in college football. So I don't really see any reason to doubt this kid. Results, even if they don't push it in over the goal line against 10 guys, I think I saw a lot from him.
Yeah, absolutely. Tough test there too, in that environment, being on the road there. Obviously, there were a decent number of Ohio State fans at that game, but still a tough spot to be in for your first high level start like that. So pretty impressive showing. We're going to talk about the top end of the nation for this week. We're going to talk about the Georgia games. They take on Auburn, Texas versus Kansas, but also some Pac-12 teams making some noise early on in 2023. All that coming up here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Our preview of Thursday night between the Lions and the Packers coming up later on Wednesday or early Thursday via Tom Vecchio, Primetime Tom, breaking down that game. I gave my first look at Week 4 NFL spreads on yesterday's show. If we talked some futures with Ryan Williams, all those right here in the Covering the Spread podcast feed. All the daily shows are up on the FanDuel YouTube page as well, and all these shows on FanDuel TV Plus. To get FanDuel TV Plus, go to FanDuel.com/watch and log in with your FanDuel account to stream Up and Adams live or watch Covering the Spread, the Solo Shot, the Heat Check, all right there. You can also find FanDuel TV Plus on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku devices. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel.com and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777. or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana, mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia. Call 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text OPEN-Y in New York. Now, Ed, we knew going into this year that Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State would all be very good teams, and that's played out for sure. But Pac-12 going down swinging in 2023. Washington has looked good. USC, Oregon, they're all 4-0 so far, and they've done it in pretty impressive fashion. So looking at the ceiling of those teams, because it requires a ceiling to make a run for a national championship, do you think any of those three Pac-12 teams have the ceiling to make a run at actually winning the whole championship?
Jim, before we talk about the Pac-12, I gotta say that I don't actually really believe that Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State have been all that great. Georgia's dropped almost 9 points in my ratings since the beginning of the season. We'll talk about them a little bit more later in the show. Michigan can't really break explosive plays in the ground game like they could last year. I'm not sure that defense is all that great, which we'll talk about a little bit more on the show as well. I guess we already talked about Ohio State. Suffice to say, I have Georgia as the best team in the nation in my member numbers at about 21.5 points. Last year, there were 3 teams that were well clear of that rating. The rating being how good you are compared to an average FBS team. So I really think the narrative is that most of the top teams suck compared to where they've been in the past. And I think this is an interesting year to see, who can break through. And so you asked, well, can any of the Pac-12 teams break through? I think the simple answer is no, because they all play each other. So, it's going to be an incredible Pac-12 slate later in the year, simply because USC has both Oregon and Washington on their schedule. I think you can poke holes at in all these teams. USC let Arizona State score 28 points on them. This was a team that we knew the ball. Look, Oregon looked great, but my numbers say they can't stop the run. Their success rate adjusted for opponent and rushing success rate on defense is terrible. So maybe that's small sample size. They clearly got a pretty good result against Colorado. I was a little bit bummed that game was such a snoozer, but and then Washington, I'm not completely sure that Washington's defense is good enough. They're clearly lighting it up on the scoreboard, and I think that's a lot of fun. So I think the one answer is no, these teams can't do it. But the other answer is, well, maybe, because when you look at the history of college football and who wins national championships, except for the last 2 years with Stetson Bennett, you're legitimately talking about a team that has a quarterback that's going to get picked first in the NFL draft. Certainly have that in USC and Caleb Williams. I think he is going to be number one. I haven't looked at any mock drafts, but I got to think Michael Penix.
You're good.
Rapidly moving up those ranks, man. It's really nice to have 3 elite receivers come back and play together for the second year straight. So you certainly have a quarterback play. I'm not a huge fan of Bo Nix, but man, I still feel like that I'm putting some of the Auburn Bo Nix on him. I think he's been pretty good numbers wise. At Oregon, I think they played exceptionally well against Colorado. We're not going to see that every week with them. But yes, so they have the quarterback play, and maybe that pushes them over the edge.
And it's for all 3 teams. They have the quarterback play, and also, like you said, it seems like things are a bit more wide open this year because Georgia has not been quite as good as we thought they may be coming into this year. So the door is at least somewhat ajar for someone to step in. Do you think that's an advantage to Michigan? Like, are they the prime contender to step in and fill the void that Georgia hasn't vacated, but is like they're opening the door a crack a little bit wider than it was before? Who do you think steps in to fill that void atop the nation?
For sure. I think it's half open, really. I still think Georgia's the team to beat. I don't know. I really haven't been overly impressed with Michigan. I think the expectations that people had coming in the season, number 2 in the preseason AP poll, they really haven't been there. They kind of drop a little bit in my ratings every week. They really haven't I don't know. They haven't been impressive. I made the point at the beginning of the season that the defense was, just good enough last year. They look kind of just good enough this year. It's not a unit that, has been really lights out. It's nice that JJ McCarthy's been playing well. I think he's taking his game to the next level. The passing game has been better. But like I said, they can't break explosive plays on the ground this year for whatever reason. I think the reason is that explosive plays are just kind of random. And I was looking at some of the offensive PFF offensive line grades this year versus last year for Michigan. They look similar. I'm not a huge. I haven't been really looking at PFF grades for college football for too long. I have a better sense for what that means. I've been looking at them for years for coverage grades for corners. So in the NFL, but it's kind of nice. My PFF subscription now gives me access to all the college football data. So that's super nice. So I've been kind of getting into that a little bit more. Anyways, I don't know. We'll see. I'm not sure Michigan's that team. So
it'll make things more fun, though, at least. And we'll definitely take that for sure. All right, let's talk about we'll talk about Georgia in a second with their game against Auburn. But let's start things off here by talking about a big battle in Texas. Kansas is going there undefeated so far. They're facing Texas, and right now the spread is 16.5. That is down from 17 yesterday at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total is 61.5. Ned, you were on Kansas last week, and they played great in the second half, covered 8.5 point spread at home, and they came through. But now they're on the road, big underdogs. So do you have faith Kansas can keep this thing close, or do you think the market is spot on with this one?
Yeah, we'll see. 2 years ago, Kansas beat Texas, and I remember watching that game and thinking, man, what is this Sark guy doing? 2 years have passed, and I think both these programs have really been elevated since then. Kansas is kind of who we thought they were this preseason. Their offense is awesome. They're second when I look at adjusted success rate, and there's really no reason to believe that's a fluke. They were an awesome offense last year as well. And defense is not particularly good. I have them 63rd in adjusted success rate. That's kind of where we expected them. That was the side that we would question. Texas has really had a great showing so far in terms of the results. Their defense has been phenomenal. They're tops in the nation in my numbers. The offense is 61st, which is, higher than they were a week ago, which I was sure was kind of a small sample size artifact. They're up to 61st. Still seems a little low for the talent that they have. And I expect that number to kind of go up as we get more data. My numbers have Texas by about 14.5 points. I honestly don't really see any reason not to take a swing. It's obviously, I feel like it's a bet that can certainly lose, right? You can have a game where Texas is going to play great on both sides of the ball, and maybe Kansas has a bad game on offense. But the numbers like it, I do think there's a little bit of value here on the road dog.
And I think the reassuring thing from that perspective is that Kansas has an offense that can score when they're trailing. I know that's kind of my concern usually, Ed, is can this team make up ground if they fall behind, or will it be kind of a cascading effect where they fall down and then can't claw their way back? But I think with Kansas in that offense, we can probably have faith that if they do fall down early, they can still at least make that game somewhat competitive. Does that factor in for you in being okay with a larger spread here?
Yeah, I certainly think there's the opportunity for backdoor covers here if things get out of hand. Texas defense, like I mentioned, looks really good in the numbers so far. But, like I said, it's not a game I love, but I actually just don't see any reason to go against my numbers here. I have this about 2 touchdowns. It seems a little bit big at 16.5.
Okay, so Ed likes Kansas plus 16.5, which is minus 108 at FanDuel Sportsbook for that one. Let's talk now about the number one team Ed was discussing before. That is the Georgia Bulldogs. And this weekend, going to Auburn. Obviously, this matchup not as fun as it would have been had Auburn not put up a stinker last week. But right now, Georgia, 14.5 point favorite. Total in this game is 46.5. And obviously, Auburn coming off a pretty rough loss to Texas A&M. Hosting the number one team in the nation now, Ed. But the spread is 14.5. They're at home, and it's a pretty low total relative to that spread. So what is your view of this game, Georgia versus Auburn?
Yeah, I actually really haven't seen Georgia play clearly the results haven't been up to expectations for what we expected for them. When I look at some of my adjusted numbers, they're 7 and 26, which is not what we expect of Georgia, but also not awful either. And Georgia's Georgia. I mean, I think there was like a team 2 years ago that we'd have some question marks because they haven't won a national title, and now they've won 2, so we kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. On Auburn's kind of a different story. It's Hugh Freeze's first year there, and it's not looking good. They lost 27-10 last week against Texas A&M, and the touchdown they had was on defense. They brought in Peyton Thorne, the quarterback from Michigan State, and he didn't take all the snaps last week. It looks like he's going to start again this week. Huge amount of number of transfers that Hugh Freeze brought in his first year. None of the numbers look particularly good. So I have this game with Georgia as an 11-point favorite. I have no interest in betting Auburn. I think there's just too many issues with this team in its first year. There's no stability at the quarterback position. There's nothing except for maybe the secondary and the pass defense that you can say with Auburn, hey, they're good. And you're playing the best team in the nation still. This is a definite pass for me.
Yeah. So even though it's a bigger value by your model, it's just kind of lack of faith in Auburn versus Kansas. You have faith in them. So I think it makes sense why you would be okay passing on this one, despite the fact you're okay taking Kansas. I do the exact same thing. So fully on board with that approach in general, despite the fact you do see value in Auburn based on the numbers. Let's finish up here by talking about Notre Dame at Duke. And right now, Notre Dame is a 5.5-point favorite on the road for this game. Total in this game is not too shabby at 51.5 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. And obviously Notre Dame, tough loss this past weekend against Ohio State. But Duke is taking care of business against inferior teams ever since that big win over Clemson in week 1. So how does Duke measure up against a very tough foe in Notre Dame here?
Well, Duke really ain't played nobody. I know they had Clemson at the beginning of the year, but that was a really fluky game where turnovers were really the biggest factor in that game. I was looking back at my numbers. I only adjusted Duke up about a point after that game. And, sorry about your Northwestern Wildcats, but the schedule really hasn't been that tough for them since, so – yeah, you look at Mike Elko in his second year, and they had a great 9-4 year last year, but lots of turnover luck. I was looking at my numbers last year, and they were about a little bit, only slightly better than FBS average when I looked at all my adjusted quantities for just the 2022 season. So in the underlying metrics, they were not really a 9-4 team. They have been better on both sides of the ball this year, but still not a team that I think is at an elite level. Notre Dame, are we getting a little bit of a discount here because of what happened last week, right? Do they put 11 guys on the field and get that win? What is this spread? I'm actually making this Notre Dame by 8. I think this Notre Dame team is pretty good. They're 15th on offense in my adjusted success rate, 35th on defense. I think there's enough talent on the defensive side of the ball. And certainly Coach Marcus Freeman is a defensive guy. It really does help to put 11 guys out on the field, though. I think the only reason you would not bet this is, that it's a road favorite here. Maybe there's a little bit of letdown after last week. I don't know. My numbers have 8. I do think there's a little bit of value on Notre Dame here. It's a team I trust.
Yeah, it's important to keep in mind, too, like your numbers know that they're on the road. So it's not as if like the road favorite thing should be a massive concern because it's not something that's like not accounted for already in the model.
Right. And I'm pretty sure I have this as the bigger home field advantage because it's kind of a conference game, but it's really not a conference kind of situation for Notre Dame. Well, that's interesting. I really should put USC and Stanford in Notre Dame's conference, right? Because they go there every other year. I don't have that yet. I might have to adjust that. Anyway, that's certainly accounted for. I think the reason my numbers like Notre Dame is that they just haven't really moved on Duke since the beginning of the year.
Right. And they've taken care of business against bad teams, which is important too. But again, your numbers know that and still have not And they still have not moved. Like, your numbers know that, and they still have not moved. And I think that's an important thing to note as well. Okay, so Ed is liking Kansas plus 16.5 and Notre Dame minus 5.5, which is minus 115 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. A lot of other games this week on tap, Ed. Where else do you see value for week number 5 in college football?
Right. I mean, I think the one last game that I really want to talk about is this Michigan-Nebraska game. And there is this total at 39.5 is pretty interesting. So Nebraska, it doesn't look like Jeff Sims is playing anymore at the quarterback position. It's the backup, or whoever was the backup at the beginning of the year that's been playing. He looks like another guy that is running the ball. Nebraska's down their top 2 running backs. The weather is interesting in this game. It's supposed to be high 80s with 18 mile per hour winds, which is not exactly a combination that you see a lot. So Michigan should win this game. They should win it comfortably, but a total of 39.5 just seems way too small for me. I have this closer to 50, and I don't think 50 should be the number because there are some situations in terms of injuries, in terms of the wind. Maybe it's the wind that kind of slows down that Michigan passing attack that has been, I think, a lot better than last year. 39.5 seems kind of insanely small to me. I think there's a little bit of value here in the over.
And it kind of goes back to what you were discussing before. Michigan has not busted off the long run so far, but there could be a lot of randomness in big plays. Maybe if they were due for negative regression last year, they could be due for positive regression in that department this year, especially looking at the PFF blocking numbers you were alluding to. If they're blocking pretty well still, got a lot of the same personnel back, I feel like you could expect them to run the ball better going forward and get bigger plays, which could help account for why this number is so low, because they have not done that yet. And that could also help them if the win does wind up being as bad as projected on Saturday.
Yeah, we shall see too, and I have the spread of this at like 14, 15. So I'm pretty close to the number, but like, if you really think this total is going to be that small and the spread's that high, it just seems like there's a way to bet this with value. I'm going to take over 39.5 because that just seems too small, even given the circumstances.
Right. That number right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, over 39.5 is minus 105 for Michigan and Nebraska. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. But as always, Ed is back with us once again tomorrow for NFL Week number 4 preview, breaking down this week's biggest games in the NFL. To get that as it is posted, make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus. And if people are looking for your numbers, looking for 5 Nuggets Saturday, sign up for your email newsletter. Where can they do all that?
Yeah, you can find everything I do at thepowerrank.com. 5 Nuggets Saturday is, I think, what most people come by for. It's my curated list of sports betting tips and analytics every Saturday at 10 a.m. Sign up for that at thepowerrank.com.
All righty. You can find Ed on Twitter at the Power Rank. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow at FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. I want to thank you all for tuning in for today. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.